Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon, folks in Europe, and good evening, folks in Asia. This is Mitch Ratcliffe. This is BIA Kelsey Live, our weekly discussion of local media and marketing, podcast that is produced by BIA Kelsey, the experts in local media and marketing, strangely enough. And I'm joined by Mike Boland, who is our chief analyst. I'm Mitch Ratcliffe. I'm Chief Product Officer at BIA Kelsey and the Senior Analyst for the Local On-Demand Economy practice. And as usual, we'll just jump right into it and talk about the news. First off, this week we're going to talk about three things: Snapchat, XAD, and the role that bots are beginning to play in the marketing environment. Snapchat has been big news all week long. They have announced an IPO that is going to be they're going to raise about $4 billion, it's estimated, at a $25 to $35 billion valuation. Snapchat, for those of you who don't use it, is a short video messaging platform in which the visual and imaging platform in which you modify yourself and make cute pictures and add filters on top. And it is very popular with a growing number of people globally. Snapchat also announced a partnership with Foursquare, the location marketing company, to geo-target Snapchat ads and other types of marketing messaging through Snapchat by geographic location, and perhaps even down to individual stores and locations. And so, Mike, you've been covering this market for a long time. What's your take first on Snapchat's prospects as a public company and their ability to grow their revenue based on this kind of geo-targeting?
Yeah, sure. I'll take those one at a time. So first, yes, the IPO. And we should specify it's a rumored IPO because
no, it's filed. It's filed.
Well, no, it's the Jobs Act dictates that companies with less than $1 billion in revenue can secretly apply for an IPO, and there are a lot of insiders that have said that they have gone ahead and do that. So it is filed, but it's like one level between filed and actually like officially filed in the public. And the Jobs Act dictates that companies can do that so they can kind of start to test investor appetite while keeping that secret, right, even though in this case it's not a secret. So anyway.
And it allows people inside to sell their stock now rather than waiting until it goes public too.
A lot of reasons. But yeah, as you mentioned, rumored 20 to 25 billion valuation. That'll make it the largest tech IPO since Facebook in 2012. Some of its strengths kind of going into that is it has 100 million active users, and about 60% of that, as you mentioned, are aged 13 to 24. So that makes it an attractive way for advertisers to reach millennials. Now, it's already targeting, and these are all the things I go through in the forecasting process for my mobile forecast. It's estimated to reach $1 billion in revenue for 2017, most of which is ad revenue. This year, it's estimated between 250 million and 350 million. And the timing is kind of opportune for Snapchat to kind of latch onto the ad world, because as we talked about in the last podcast, Facebook is reaching maximum ad load and is trying to innovate in other ways to kind of place advertising. So as Snapchat goes public, I think, it's obviously going to face greater investor scrutiny, and it's going to have to refine its ad strategy or its overall revenue strategy in the area where the majority of that 250 million comes from, which, like Facebook, is advertising. So that leads into the Foursquare item that you alluded to, which is that, one of the areas that Snapchat has been innovating in ad formats is with localization. And one of my big predictions for 2017, which we'll publish in about a month, is that it will continue to localize its ad options for advertising. So this Foursquare partnership does just that. So as background, one of the major ad innovations of the last year was its geo filters. You mentioned the kind of filter. So this allows anyone to create a graphical overlay, such as a brand or something event specific, that anyone nearby can add to their snaps. And then, and these filters overall, not just the geo ones, are very popular on Snapchat and are part of the natural use of the app, as you mentioned. So this is a very kind of native ad format. So bringing geo filters into the pictures, users can essentially pay $5 per hour for roughly 1,000 square foot area. And then that geo filter is available to anyone who's within that geofence during that time. So it's great for events.
So let me kind of draw that thought out just a little bit. So these filters, I could, for instance, have a filter that you get because you came into my store.
Yeah.
Or if you came into my store and purchased, I could grant you a king for a day hat
Yeah.
that says that is on my that I bought a new car or
Well, the way
whatever.
I would find it is that I go into Snapchat and I go into all the available filters, and there are 10 or 12 that are the default ones, like a cat face and
Mm-hmm.
cat ears and all those kind of things. And then within that list, when I'm in that geofence, one of the available filters is your like auto dealership.
Right.
And the way people are
But
using
I can
this,
imagine that being a lot more prominent, popping on you
yeah, it
too.
might be the first one available of the default
Yeah.
kind of geo or the filters. So it's great for kind of events. We see it at a
Mm-hmm.
lot of tech conferences where brands will be the first one to kind of establish their geo filter for them.
Yeah.
Conferences, birthday parties, they've been very popular. So essentially, what Foursquare brings to the table now is a lot more precise geotagged information to govern the parameters of that geo filter. So it allows, Snapchat to improve the offering around certain places rather than just a geofence, which is technically just a circle with a center point. Foursquare's polygon data of 90 million
Right.
places makes it more contextual with geofences that pertain to places like businesses and parks and beaches and movie theaters and your auto dealership in that example you gave. And I think that makes the user ad creation a lot easier and more precise because
Right.
that place database is now part of the geofilter ad creation and targeting process within Snapchat.
So, do you see this as improving the offline attribution qualities that Snapchat will be able to deliver, and certainly Foursquare too?
Yeah.
How does that compare with the attribution capabilities you see from Facebook or other competitors at this point?
Yeah, so using Foursquare's data, it's just a lot more precise. So instead of knowing like someone was within this 1,000-meter like circle, you can know
Mm-hmm.
that they were in the Starbucks next door as opposed to the Target, another good example is like we always give in the location-based world is, were they in the Target or were they in the McDonald's and the Starbucks within the Target? Because that contextual
Right.
information helps with the kind of attribution stuff you're talking about. And Foursquare's precision data around polygons within the circle and what's where, I think really helps with that attribution
Mm-hmm.
question. And I think this is also, most of this discussion's been around Snapchat from the Foursquare perspective. I think this is interesting because this solidifies the message that it's been sending, and that its vast data trove of polygon data is what makes Foursquare valuable, and it can work in the background to improve ad targeting on all kinds of products.
Right.
And I spend a lot of time talking to Foursquare about this stuff, and we're actually going to have Foursquare President Steven Rosenblatt on a panel I'm running at our next conference, so we'll kind of be able to ask him that attribution question too, because I think it's a good one.
So you'll see the answer to that on air in about 3 weeks, folks. So that's December 5th through 7th in Boston if you'd like to join us. So let's turn to the next story. XAD. Now, XAD is a longstanding player in the online advertising space, and they did two things this week. First off, they raised another round, $42.5 million. They've raised $116 million to date. I'd say this looks like a flat round. It wasn't necessarily a big endorsement of the future as much as we're going to continue to fund this because it looks like it has promise.
Yep.
So last year they raised $50 million to $250 million valuation. Since they didn't disclose the total valuation this time, 42.5 really suggests this is a flat round. But what they did with part of this money is complete an acquisition of WeatherBug, which is the second largest network of weather data services in the United States and much of the world. That acquisition, the amount wasn't disclosed, but the idea really is vertical integration of their inventory with a set of content that they can serve on a very consistent and very predictable way. Weather information is one of the most used forms of data in the United States. Was this a good idea first to start buying the sources of your inventory? And second, let's talk about how that competes with Weather Channel going forward. But
Sure.
first,
So first, the kind of benefits and the logic behind this acquisition, I think work on two levels. So the first one is that it increases XAD's inventory vastly in terms of its publisher network. WeatherBug operates, mobile, desktop, Apple Watch apps, has a connected TV app, and it has about 50 million users. And not just kind of like quantitatively speaking, but qualitatively speaking. This is like good inventory because, weather is one of the top 3 activities consumers engage with on their mobile devices, but also consumers are more likely to turn on their location services for weather apps versus any other category like games and categories of apps. And the reason why that's important, and this aligns with XAD's kind of value proposition since the beginning, is that there's a lot of kind of contention in the industry where a lot of ad networks are essentially guessing location or using kind of blunt or disingenuous practices to get an accurate location reading. And the reason why that is because the hardest thing to do is get people to turn on would this app would like to use your location, yes or no. So in most cases, the answer is no. And then ad networks will have to make up for that by using blunt tactics like cell tower triangulation or reverse IP lookup, and it just results in very imprecise location reading. So XAD and a few others pride themselves in having more precise location data, and one of the ways you do that is the ad network that you work with, the publisher network from which you're getting your inventory, contains apps that have users that are more likely to opt in to share location. And that includes things like mapping and weather, as opposed to just having an ad network. There's a bunch of games and other things. So anyway, that concept, this acquisition really kind of vaults XAD's abilities there. Now, the second level this works on and why this is a good acquisition is that the kind of WeatherBug meteorological data, comes from its network of over 10,000 private weather stations, and apparently that's 5 times larger than the National Weather Service's collection. I didn't know that until this acquisition.
Although the Weather Channel's is 82,000.
Yeah, wow. So that one's even bigger. But anyway, so I guess I'll wrap up in saying that this gives it a direct line into this like contextually and situationally relevant data, to improve its location-based ad targeting in all the apps in its publisher network. So the first reason is it gets more inventory and good inventory. The second is it can use the data from all that weather data across all of its apps. And that comes with the concept that, location targeting, we all often think of, like we were talking about with Foursquare and Snapchat, we often think of it as, serving an ad when someone is near a business. But it goes much beyond that in terms of being able to serve contextually relevant data to someone that isn't necessarily near a business. And some of the ways that's done is with location-related data. And weather is such a rich, kind of contextually rich data set to use along those lines. So it'll help it on that level too.
Well, and so this is to the question about rolling up your inventory like this. And it's a smart move. Clearly, XAD's the right acquirer for somebody like WeatherBug because WeatherBug has always been monetizing its apps. They're aligned in terms of how they think about the delivery of those apps.
But
true. Let's talk about the IBM Weather Channel acquisition in this context. Now, they bought the Weather Channel for 2 reasons. One is in order to facilitate the continued delivery of advertising through the Weather Channel, but also that 80,000 point weather collection system is being fed into Watson to do a lot more than advertising. It's doing weather patterns. It's providing all sorts of feedback on crops and other kinds of information that they intend to monetize in the future. When you buy something like this now as a content developer, which is essentially what XAD is becoming by buying the WeatherBug company, do you need to be thinking about using your data in more ways and monetizing it in more ways in order to be really competitive with somebody like Watson, which essentially treats the ad inventory as gravy and uses the data to drive vast new revenue?
You're right. There's so much you can do with that data, everything down to like inventory management and shipping and logistics and all that stuff you mentioned. And that is very much the play for Watson in buying, or IBM and integrating Weather Channel into Watson. So for XAD, its core business is advertising. So I think that's its primary concern and how WeatherBug really kind of augments that. But that said, we're seeing as companies like XAD grow and mature and looking for additional revenue streams, I think the opportunity is there to work with the same types of customers, so the brands and the advertisers it's working with, to also work with them on other levels and deeper levels and on operational levels to use
Yeah.
that data in ways that says not only will we help you target your advertising and your marketing intentions and bringing in more customers, but also we'll help you know how many units to order for next month. And it could be just kind of an all-around one-stop shop offering, if there is alignment. And I think there could be alignment between marketing services and some of these kind of operational things when it comes to like product inventory. Marketing and inventory and customer service, and these things should go all hand in hand. And those are all ways that weather data can assist.
And really what we're talking about is the application of machine learning on top of all this data. So that may be one of the competencies that an XAD or WeatherBug needs to add as they move forward in order to really magnify the investment that they've made today.
Absolutely. So speaking of machine learning, that leads right into our third topic. So Mitch, you've been looking a lot at what Microsoft is doing, what they've announced recently with respect to bots, which is, of course, an area of growth across the spaces we're looking at. Microsoft has done a lot with bots on a lot of levels, including what they've done with Cortana in kind of facilitating local commerce through Cortana across the Windows operating system. This kind of relates to that, but also goes in some other directions. So tell us about what's going on there.
Yeah, I've been playing with both AWS and Azure's data lake services, trying to understand really what we're going to be able to do with these things. And the announcement this week, Mary Jo Foley wrote this story in ZDNet, I think it was on Monday, is that they're introducing what they're calling serverless bots. That is, you don't have to stand up a server and pay for it and wait for people to come use your bot. The bot only is charged for usage that actually happens. And so essentially it is an application waiting to run in the cloud rather than a server in the cloud you're paying for. That changes the entry point to the bot business substantially. There's a much lower upfront investment. And now we're going to see these kinds of bot toolkits from a variety of sources, and a lot of startups are going to be coming out with these as well as people come up with new models that allow the bots to be more and more, I would not say human-like, but humane in their interaction with people. And if those of you who have watched Westworld, the new HBO series about it, basically a virtual reality world where everybody's made of flesh and blood, there are chatbots that you encounter in this story. They're characters that walk up and basically, how you feeling? Want to do something? Unfortunately, the things people choose to do are the most disgusting things they could possibly do to these poor robots.
No spoilers. I'm 2 episodes behind. No spoilers.
No spoilers, but these robots really suffer. And the chatbots are explicitly described as being tuned into the emotional characteristics of the user, of the visitor, who's paying apparently $30,000 or $40,000 a day for this experience.
Yeah.
And understanding how chatbots are going to take these sort of interim roles in interactions where the chatbot will help the organization tee up an experience, which may be very customized or personalized to an individual over the course of time. The bots are the information gatherers that people used to do, by picking up the phone and keeping you on hold, or that you would see somebody typing in response to you. And we're moving from that kind of awkward environment to one where there's automation, but the automation could be awkward too. The bot platforms that are coming out, and I think Microsoft's is a very interesting one, because let's face it, if you take Windows 7, 10, 8, and XP and add up their current market share, that's 87.6% of the market in the world. And that's as of today.
Yeah.
From NetMarket. And they have a reason to think that they can put their bots almost anywhere, in Slack and Facebook and Skype, in Office 365, eventually in LinkedIn, which Microsoft has acquired. But the bots themselves need to be approached by the developers of the bots almost like they were hiring somebody, thinking about the roles they need to fill in the engagement and how the bot can help either catch and hand somebody off to the next step, or even potentially fulfill a certain set of services like, oh, you do want to order a ticket to the Roger Waters conference. I can take care of that right now without any human intervention.
Yeah.
But we're at a point where marketers need to be really taking seriously the fact that this is the handoff from the initial touch, and that bots are essentially like a marketing team of robots that you need to start thinking about deploying in and around your brand. Now, Microsoft does account for a lot of the market share in the world, but that doesn't mean these platforms are going to be predominantly from Microsoft. And marketers really need to think about this now. I had been less enthusiastic about the bot for some time, but having seen the rise of Messina bot, Botwick, which is so Chris Messina has a bot and John Borthwick have a bot. These things tell jokes. These things understand that you're joking with them in some cases. And that is the beginning of a narrative experience or a storytelling experience that marketers need to embrace and bring to bear on the brand relationship.
Yeah, and I think the venue where they're actually going to be the most prevalent is in messaging apps. Messaging apps are exploding. Over-the-top messaging apps that are taking the place of SMS. Facebook Messenger, Snapchat. We went over Snapchat earlier. And these are just an enormously popular touch point with users,
gaming
especially
too.
On mobile. And yes, and in game. So they're going to be everywhere. But also the handoff point is key because I think there's been a bit of a hype cycle in 2016 with respect to bots and the degree to which they are going to take over these kind of commerce-oriented situations. And I was I was actually the opposite of you. I was very kind of bullish on bots at first, and I've since kind of scaled back a little bit, and I think we've kind of met in the same place in the middle where I think that there's a great opportunity there, but I think that it has to be looked at as kind of the top of the funnel. I'm not sure if that's the right metaphor, but or the beginning
it's
of
below, it's just below that touch. But the point, is always going to be you need to gather a little information from the user to customize.
Yeah.
Use the bot to do that, and then set up the next step, which may be a human engaged.
It usually is going to be human. And it's funny, we went over this yesterday in our webinar that we did with Marchex about the area of call commerce, which is, the using phone calls, optimizing phone calls and using phone calls as a form of business lead. And one of the questions that we tackled was, in all this talk of bots, is the phone call going to die? And on all the analysis we've done, the answer is no. It actually might assist the phone call and cause more phone calls to happen to businesses by creating a touch point that is easy for users in messaging apps and gaming and all these places where bots are going to be, where it can kind of pique the interest of a user or answer their initial questions and then hand it off to a live agent. And the other point that Marchex's John Busby made on the webinar was that in a lot of cases, the eventual kind of human intervention results in a much higher degree of conversions because that is a pre-qualified user. In whatever the context is. So I think that instead of like bots versus human interaction, it's really going to be additive to both if done right.
Bots and humans. But, the other thing is that the kind of call analysis that you were describing yesterday in terms of listening and analyzing the meaning and the intent in a call is going to need to be applied to bots. And right now we're limited in terms of our inputs to capture how people are really feeling. It's down to text.
It's tough when it comes to voice inflection and context and all that stuff. And AI is kind of getting there, but right now that's largely a human endeavor, which is a major cost in these kind of call analytics or not just call analytics, but voice search, transcriptions. There are so many places where I like to call it big voice. Everyone talks about big data. One of the next areas is going to be big voice, to take all of the kind of spoken word, whether it be podcasts or conferences or phone calls that coming into business, and to better kind of mine all of that just transcript data to get just more kind of contextually rich information that is really valuable and can inform ongoing optimization of ad campaigns or just lots of different areas. So I think that's a gold mine when it gets here.
Absolutely. So a lot of this is what we're going to be talking about at BIA Kelsey next in December, on December 5th through 7th at the Royale in Boston. So if you would like to attend, please stop by biakelsey.com and check out the information about next. Mike and I will be there. The whole team will be there, and we've got a great set of speakers on AI, on marketing, CMOs from a number of companies, as well as media and technology firms seeking new opportunities and new vistas in their business. So join the conversation. It'll be a fascinating one. Thank you, Mike, once again, as always. And we'll see you next Thursday. We'll be looking at ramping up our podcast production in the next couple of months. So at the new year, if you're interested in talking about local media with us, please give me a call or reach out to me at Mitch Ratcliffe, mratcliffe@biakelsey.com. And let's talk about having you on as a guest. Thanks very much, folks. We'll see you next Thursday.